welcome to Our Special Lives. I'm Laura McGrath, and today we are talking to a fabulous guest, Jacquelyn Benjamin, who is a holistic health and nutrition coach, about the 5 do's and don'ts for managing your stress. If you're feeling worn out, overwhelmed, and are looking for ways to have more joy in your life, you won't want to miss this interview. And before we get started, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and please share if you know someone who might want to hear this. Jacquelyn Benjamin founded Weaving Alchemy, a coaching platform focusing on all aspects of wellness. After receiving a bachelor's of science and working in the pharmaceutical industry for over a decade, Jackie became interested in preventing sickness and disease. In addition to becoming certified in multiple disciplines, including functional medicine health coaching and AFPA health and fitness, Jackie has spent thousands of hours studying nature, psychology, coaching, plants, energy, relationships, neuroscience, and the human body. She brings this depth of knowledge and wisdom to her many coaching clients so that they can create meaningful change in their lives to find their most optimal mental and physical health and live a life they love. Hi, Jackie. Welcome to Our Special Lives.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Before we get started, I wanted the audience to understand a little bit about your background and what got you interested in this area of work.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be in pharmaceuticals for about 10 years when I finished college. And it was a great job. I was sort of immersed into Western medicine in a whole new way. And it was exciting to see what physicians had to offer and what patients were needing. And at the same time, there was always this little bit of a gap between what was able to be offered and what people actually needed. And so I actually experienced my own injury. In 2014, I had a cervical spinal injury that required surgery. At the same time, it stopped me from being able to hold my son. There were all these like emotional things that were happening at the same time. And a friend of mine turned me on to essential oils for managing pain and sort of, handling things without having to go into medication and things like that. So I got really into it after I realized how effective it was for me. And I took some classes and became certified, and it sort of got the ball rolling down this holistic course. So after that, I became very interested in nutrition and how the food we eat can affect our energy levels and how our body feels, and even our emotions. And then that sort of took me down the next step of becoming a coach through functional medicine. And that just looks at life very differently. So Western medicine takes where you are right now and sort of gives you a solution to your problem. But functional medicine did this really great work of going back in time and looking at the history, how you came to get to this point, and sort of working backwards to alleviate the problem. So all these things together sort of formulated this wellness business that I've created. So I do a little bit of aromatherapy, I do a little bit of nutrition, I do a lot of coaching. And it's all with this wellness perspective, this holistic idea that, we're one whole body, mind, emotion. It's all relevant. It's not just like, hey, I have a problem, I need it fixed. There's so many layers. And I like that's the perspective I come to working with clients with. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I just want to tell the audience that I've been seeing Jackie and I've just had such a great experience. And so I approached her about coming on the show because I wanted to share her wisdom and insights with everybody. But I can vouch it's just been an amazing experience. And so with that said, why don't we talk a little bit about kind of the do's and don'ts for managing stress? Because obviously this time of year, things are very hectic, things are very stressful. I think the audience could really benefit from some, simple ways that they can incorporate stress management into their daily lives. Why don't we talk about the first do and don't that you brought up, which is a morning routine? So can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, hands down, I think having a good morning routine is probably one of the most effective things I've seen clients and even myself implement and have immediate results. So I always feel like that little gap of time when you first wake up before you have to go to your first commitment is really crucial. So I do work with clients a lot on formulating a routine that they can kind of over time become second nature with. That includes time to have self-development, whether they want to meditate, whether they want to journal, whether it's just introspective time, yoga, any of those things. If you can, for some reason, the time seems to be more generous in the mornings. Like people would call the 5 a.m. club, where it's just, if you put your efforts in early on, it just sets your whole day up for productive, and to be more productive, to feel better about what you're doing, and to not feel like you're neglecting yourself. So if you can handle the things that really are meaningful to you first thing, then the rest of the day, if you slip, it's okay, because you've already fit that in. So I always feel like the morning routine is, hands down the way to go if you're trying to make immediate changes in your feeling, living, lifestyle, all of those things.
Yeah. And you talk a little bit about staying in default mode.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean?
Yeah. So one thing I've noticed, and I think we all do this, is when you wake up, your mind just starts. If you don't gear it in a direction, it just sort of takes over and this default mode picks up. And for most of us, our default mode isn't always the mode that you would want to be running the show, right? It's like the complaints, it's the I have to's and the dread and the, all of these responsibilities start to sort of pile into the mind. And if you don't give it a direction, a healthy place to go be, it's going to take over. And then that sort of sets that negativity ball rolling. And I see that a lot. And I've seen that even with myself. Just if you don't set yourself up for, I want my day to go this way, it will literally go any way that your mind takes it. So it's a little bit like controlling the 4-year-old in here, giving it a positive space to be productive, and you set the tone. So I think that's one of the things that is really helpful for people, if they can just really get into their morning routine, figure out what would be most meaningful for them to employ, and just set up even alarms and, anything you can do to build the habit of it so that your default doesn't take over. You end up engaging in life the way that you want to.
So I have a morning routine and I completely love it. And if for some reason I have a day where, something weird is going on and I can't do my morning routine, I just feel really off. So I just want to share that it's totally worth it to form a morning routine, and you will feel so much better if you do. But for people who don't have a morning routine and want to get started, how do you coach your clients into getting started with this whole concept? Like, when should they do it? How long should they spend? What are like 2 or 3 things that they should incorporate in their morning routine to have it be a successful experience?
Yeah, those are good questions. I think it depends on each client. And I think that's one of the things that's really important about maybe even working with a coach or getting into your own goals. Because if you know what your goals are, you really know how to set up that morning routine. And for all of us, it's different. So for some of us, we need to get the movement in, because that really is going to lead to our feeling our best selves, right? So if we need to move first, and some people need to write and process first. So it's a little bit of like know thyself before you set up your routine. And I think that's one of the benefits of working with a coach, because we can take your current routine and tweak it a little bit. I mean, some people want to go all in, some people need just fine tuning. So it really just depends on what your goals are, what you're hoping to accomplish, how much time and flexibility you have, those types of things, so that you can set it up for yourself, because it really is personal.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I think people sometimes it's a daunting thing to think of changing your day and changing your routine. And most people feel kind of limited in the mornings. Mm-hmm. But really, even 10 minutes can be amazing. If you fill your 10 minutes the right way, it can leave you feeling, infused and energized and rejuvenated and ready to start your day, as opposed to feeling like, you're stuck and you don't have time and you're rushing through.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to owning your time.
Let's move on to the next one, which is about food. So can you tell us how food can either enhance or detract from a good level of stress management?
Yeah. So I think nutrition is one of those things where it's, like we've gotten so convenience based with things that sometimes we just reach for what's easy or fast. And oftentimes those things are deficient in nutrients. And so that was one of the things that I was really interested in with holistic nutrition, was how to eat for energy, how to eat for vitality, how to eat for longevity, all of those types of things, as opposed to eating just to be full for a moment and, filling up a meal. So a lot of times I'll talk with people about their current diets, and then we try to make adjustments for like when we eat, what we eat, those types of things, because I think that's just something we've overlooked, that our nutrition can actually give us so much energy, and it doesn't take long to feel a difference. I've noticed that with most of my clients, if they're doing sort of an overhaul, that by day 4, they're like, wow, this is incredible. They can feel the infusion of the nutrients and the vitality and the energy kind of kicking back in. So, and the same goes the opposite way. When you fall off, you can feel how, if you've been eating well for a little bit and then you have sort of an off day, it really pulls on your energy levels and you just don't feel as emotionally present. It can be very distracting and you just sort of go into a slump. Mm-hmm. So, paying attention to what you're putting in the body is so crucial for making sure the body feels really good.
Yeah, I think this time of year, it's super common to feel that increased stress and then reach for the sugar or the alcohol. Just being really mindful of that is kind of what I hear you saying, and maybe trying to balance some of that out with healthier choices.
Right. And figuring out ways to make things that make you feel good, how to make those convenient and fast and easy. Mm-hmm. Right. So, like vegetable soup's a big one that I've been talking about lately with clients because it's cold and that's something easy. It's easy on the system to digest and it's loaded with nutrients. Making one pot on Sunday and having it last, or, freezing again for a second meal, just so that things can be easier. It doesn't always have to be running out and grabbing something fast. You can make your healthy choices fast and convenient too, with just a little bit of prep. And once that becomes a habit, it just becomes easy to employ.
Yeah, I kind of do the same thing with a green juice I make. So I just take a bunch of whatever greens I've got, cucumber, celery, parsley, all that stuff. I just stick it in the blender with a little bit of lemon juice and sea salt. And I make like a gallon of this juice over the weekend. And then all week long, I just kind of like periodically have a glass of this green juice. And it's great because I don't have to prep anything. It's in my refrigerator. I can just, grab it and go. And it's just made getting that really healthy infusion of green vegetables super easy.
Yeah, that's a great hack. I think that's like all those little hacks where you can just do it, make it part of what you do, and then make it easy for the times that you're using it. That's just building it as part of that becomes your new default system.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. My husband is not like a huge vegetable lover, but he actually will, drink a glass of green juice every night. And just because it's, again, so easy and convenient and it's awesome. He's getting, a couple servings of vegetables without even having to chop anything or prep anything. So that's been one way that we can kind of incorporate those concepts.
Yeah. And can you feel when you have your green juice, can you feel your energy levels? Do you feel like it's an infusion of?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's one of the things I like to drink first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. And I just feel like it really kind of gets the trajectory of the day going in the right direction. And the other thing I find, which I don't know if this is just me or if this is a thing, but if I have a couple of green juices every day, I find myself less inclined to grab stuff that is, less nutritious. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's because my body is kind of getting what it needs from that green juice. And so it's not seeking other food as much or whatever, but I just find that it really keeps my eating in check.
Yeah. It might be something related to the lemon juice you have in there too, because that can help curb the cravings for sweets and all that. You just have a lot of good nutrients that are very dense going in. That's, just flooding your system. So that's great.
Yeah. And the lemon juice is really critical because it helps the vegetables not oxidize. So it does keep for like 5 to 7 days in the refrigerator. So that's like another great reason to use the lemon juice if you're thinking about making a green juice. So let's move on to the next thing, which is gratitude. So tell us about a gratitude practice and how to implement one. Yeah.
Gratitude has been one of those things. It's been so well researched. We have so much data. We have scientific data that shows that this can actually rewire your brain. It can change the way your brain operates, which changes your outlook and changes your perspective. So, I always like, especially if you have had a stressful day, just closing out your day simply, and just think of 3 things before you go to sleep that you've been grateful for. I mean, you can go much more complicated than that, and you can journal and, write gratitude letters to people, or you can keep it really simple. It's whatever works for you, but just the act of noticing what's going well, what's working well, something that I can be positive for, and sort of going to sleep on that.
Yeah.
That's a level of peace in the rest that, if you go to sleep mentally recycling negative thoughts, it's just sort of going to disturb your sleep. So I like the idea of doing something by the bed. You can write it down if that helps and track it over time. And I've worked with many people on the gratitude list, and it shifts everyone. There's just no way it can't. Focusing on what's not working well gives you more of that, and focus on what works well gives you more of that. So
yeah,
I always say that gratitude leaves the window open for more good things to come in. And if we don't let that window open, we just can't receive as much goodness as we could if we were willing to see how good things really are.
Yeah, I incorporated a gratitude practice, and it's kind of like a little bit of a blend of what you described. I just write like 3 things I'm grateful for in the morning, and it's really simple, but it does kind of kick off my day in a nice way, and it definitely shifts your mindset to like, I have what I need. I have, so much in my life. And when you start your day from that mindset, your day really goes a lot better because you're looking at things a lot more positively. I have another friend who has an alarm twice on her like iPhone. And so it goes off twice a day, like at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And she just says like 1 or 2 things that she's grateful for at that time. So it's kind of a nice way to start the day and end the day. So it's just a couple of ideas for how to incorporate it.
Yeah, it really can be life-changing. I mean, the science on the neuroplasticity and being able to rewire how we look at things, it's such an easy tool that doesn't require anything. It doesn't require the help of anyone else. You can do it totally privately and alone. And it just sort of rewires everything so that you have a different outlook at what you're facing. So
yeah, because from an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are wired to look for the negative, and that saved us from the saber-toothed tiger, and it saved us from, the snake, and like all of these terrible things that were, imminently going to cause great bodily harm or death at any moment, a million years ago. But those things aren't around now, but we still have that sort of negative seeking mentality, and a lot of us aren't even aware that we do this, but looking for the negative is how we are hardwired. So changing that and shifting the focus toward the things that are working and that are good kind of retrains your brain, and you kind of overcome that primitive programming that our brains have. So from like a neurological standpoint, it makes so much sense that gratitude would be very life-changing.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I noticed that it helps with is just helping you find where you're negative, right? So once you start the gratitude work and you start paying attention to what's working well, you start seeing where you kind of derail sometimes a little easier, and you're like, oh, got to get back on track. So if you ever find that you're spinning or spiraling down a path that you'd rather not go down, that isn't going to take you somewhere you want to go, you can immediately stop it by just going, okay, that's it. I'm grateful. These are the things I'm grateful for. Take a deep breath and walk away. And it sort of just shifts gears and shifts paths for you.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I was struggling with a relationship in my life a little while back. And one of the things I started doing was when I would talk to this person, I would actually make a quick list of the things that were good about our interaction. Because in my mind, I was a little pre-programmed to look for the negative because we had kind of a negative pattern of interacting. And when I started writing down the things that were good about, our conversations or interactions, it completely changed my view of that relationship. And I know relationships this time of year can be a little bit more in focus, maybe not so much with COVID, but, a lot of times around the holidays, we get together with family and people really, quote unquote, press our buttons. And so going into some of those interactions and looking for the things you're grateful for with that person where you might have a little bit of, tension or anxiety is a great way to shift that relationship pattern. So I'm just offering that up as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It definitely lightens the heaviness of things too. If you, and it just sort of brings in that element of compassion. We're all human. We're all doing our best. Seeing, we want to be seen positively. So seeing others in that same way is a great start.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about connections. Speaking of family, let's talk about connections and how we can use that to help or hurt our stress level.
Yeah, I think it's especially if you're in, this is 2020. We've all had some connections suffer this year. And it's probably given us some insight about the connections we really value versus connections that we might want to just continue not having to go through.
Yeah.
But I can't express enough how much telling our story is actually a part of living our story, and so having someone that you can talk with openly and meaningfully can really be so healing. And a lot of times that's not our family. It's not our mom or our grandmother or grandfather, people that we're close to. It's people who are so detached from the situation. They can just give you a space to be heard and to sort of process what you're going through. And that's where I think like therapists, coaches, and people like that can come in. So if you're, a caregiver, if you're under a lot of stress and you really feel like you have a lot of frustration from not being heard, maybe don't go to the best friend that you've always gone to. Look for a different outlet so that you can be heard in a new way, because having someone reflect back to you what you're saying and feeling and thinking can really help you get clarity on where you really are. And so then that deepens your meaningful connections. So there's all kinds of meaningful connections. The friends and the family all matter, but there's a lot of value that can come out of creating meaningful connections with professionals too, that can bring a lot of value to your life.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love the coaching process so much, because, I am so lucky. I have so many like dear, close friends who I've had for a very long time, and I love them. But I'd say that when I interact with them, they're kind of in more of a supportive, validating role in my life. And sometimes what I need is that, like you said, objective third party to say, hey, like you're looking at this one way, maybe you should consider looking at this another way. They can kind of point out where we have a hard time seeing our own blind spots. And that's why I think a coach or a therapist is really helpful, because they can kind of point out those blind spots to you. And once you know what you need to work on, your life can really be optimized. If you kind of stay with your old thoughts and everyone's validating your thoughts and everyone's supporting those thoughts, you don't really grow. And so I think a coach offers a lot of growth opportunity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This was, when I got into coaching, it was not anything I had experienced before. And so when I went through that program, I actually got to experience on the receiving it. And it was just like, it was the mind blown of not needing the validation, but just needing the reflection of, I've been sitting in this feeling for a long time and I have all these rich emotions around it. And really, it wasn't as heavy as I thought it was. It just sort of recycled as a story that kind of played out. And so when I was able to verbalize it in a different way to someone who was completely not involved in any way, hearing it reflected back, I'm like, oh, there's a lot more opportunity in this than I'm allowing in this, so it just gives a totally different perspective, and it can be validating in a new way, but it does promote your own growth as opposed to just saying, yeah, you're right, which doesn't always get you to the next level. And so many of us are trying to get to the next level, to the better level.
Yeah, and one thing I like about the coaching process is that not only can a coach kind of see your blind spots or see areas of improvement, but then they can also tell you how to, remedy or rectify or move forward in that area, which is great, because, when you find out what you need to work on, that's one thing, but figuring out how to move past that and how to put how to put action steps in your life to bring you to that next level. That's, something else that I've certainly benefited from through the coaching process.
Yeah. And even it's supportive of like that quiet change. Like sometimes we have our own private goals that we want to go through, and, we want to discover the next part of ourselves, and it doesn't have to involve everyone we know. So coaches are really great for setting small goals and celebrating those with you and helping you continue on down that path. So it's, I just can't say how much the value that comes into life when you bring people in who are supportive of you and your efforts and your goals. It is a game changer. It just elevates you and makes you feel so supported in a brand new way. So I always do encourage, if you have the means and you can, reach out to a coach or a therapist and see what you can clear out of all these emotions that we carry.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's the holiday season, or people might have a birthday. I can't think of any better gift that someone could either give to themselves or give to a family member than this type of coaching, because it's just really remarkable how much of a boost in the quality of life it will give you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so our last topic is talking about emotional release, and you just touched on that a little bit. But let's first talk about emotions and kind of how they store up in our body and why it's important that we release them.
Yeah, this was like life-changing for me. I was always just super emotional growing up, and, value my emotions and think I need to hold on to all of them because they're mine and they all have a place. But what I learned going through so much of what I've been through over the last, 10, 15 years, even watching people get ill and get better, or get ill and get worse, and those types of things, is that our body's a container. And all of these emotions, if we were only feeling joy and bliss and all of that, it would be fine for us to hold all that in and never let it go. But most of us aren't. We're feeling these heavier emotions and we sort of hold on to them. And like I said, the body's a container. It just sort of settles into certain places in the body and finds weak spots. And if you don't give yourself the opportunity to cleanse that out, it over time creates this instability and disease, frustration, pain, chronic tension. All kinds of things can result from not giving yourself a way to clear out what's heavy. So I always am promoting, get rid of it, let it go, and find ways to move the body. Because it's, on one hand, we talked about having someone to talk to and that being meaningful connection, and that is therapeutic on a level. But there's also the body that needs to be cleared out at the same time, so that all this processing can make space for something new and easier and not so difficult to process. So
Yeah.
things like yoga, and especially Yin Yoga, if this is something that really speaks to you, Yin Yoga is designed to help us relieve some of these emotions from the body. And so you just kind of create space and hold these postures so that the emotion can find its way out. And so lots of times people will have deep release moments and moments of crying and release in a time that they have nothing actually emotional going on. It's just the space has been given now for that release to take place. And it can come through dance and yoga and even just walking or running, martial arts. People come up with all kinds of ways to move the body. But what becomes dangerous is when you have all this heaviness and frustration and stress, and then if you don't move the body, it just sits and it stays with you. It stays part of you, and it becomes part of like how you look at life. And people can become stiff and armored. You lose flexibility, you lose strength. So it really does sort of pull on the vitality levels of the body.
Yeah. It's funny for anyone who maybe is thinking, oh, our emotions aren't held in our body. I always like the example of crying, because crying is feeling an emotion, and then the tears are the physical manifestation of that. So if your body can produce tears in response to sadness or grief or anger, what else is happening in our body? I mean, we have all the evidence we need by looking at the fact that we can tear, we can have a physical reaction to an emotion. So the idea that we can also have other physical reactions to emotions in other areas of our bodies shouldn't be that surprising. And I remember my experience where I really internalized this was about 20 years ago. I have scoliosis and some other back issues, and I was having this recurrent back pain. And a friend of mine, actually a guy that I work with, had ruptured a disc and was slated for back surgery. And a friend of his had recommended this book by John Sarno, Dr. John Sarno from NYU Medical School. He's basically a spinal doctor. And he wrote a book called Healing Back Pain. And interestingly, even though he's like a Western medicine doctor, he talked about how emotions are held a lot of times in your sort of back and spinal and neck area. And if you can at least acknowledge those emotions, you don't even have to process them out necessarily, but even just acknowledging that you're carrying these negative emotions around and your body's trying to get you to pay attention to them by giving you this sort of pain in your neck and your back, you can actually heal your own back pain. And so my colleague who was slated for back surgery for these herniated discs read the book, and 2 days later, his pain had gone from like a 10 to like a 2, and he canceled the surgery. And he actually went up to New York and saw Dr. Sarno. And, within a very short time, his pain went to 0. And so I read this book because I had obviously had this chronic issue as well. And, it completely alleviated my back pain as well. So, for anybody in the audience who's like, oh, I don't know if I believe this, that your body stores your emotions and, all of that, I just want you to think about that simple example of a tear and how the tear is the physical manifestation of your internal emotional state.
Yeah, that's such a great, powerful story. And I've heard so many like that, where once the emotion's been addressed, the body just lets go of whatever it was using to get your attention. And I do think the body tends to be very literal. So when we have back pain, lower back is like the inability to feel supported, and having pain up on the upper part, it's like sort of having the weight of the world on your shoulders. So it feels like that and it acts like that in the body. And it's sort of saying, hey, this is too much. And there's a book called The Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert. And she was sort of like the first person to put the chemistry into this and say like, hey, there's like peptides that go along with this. And there is chemistry. And even with the fact that you brought up the tears, like if we just sort of walk outside and our eyes water because of the wind, the chemistry of the tears is different than when we cry from emotion. So if we have like really heavy sadness and grief, the chemistry in the tears is different. It's not just tears, it's what's being released. All these hormones come out of the body. And that release means that they're not being held in and crystallizing and becoming uric acid in your joints and things like that, that just sort of have this really, really traumatic effect on the body. That's probably been one of the most life-changing realizations for me over the past 10 years is emotions are affecting you physically, like it or not. And you can give yourself space to process it, or you can hold it in. But over time, you'll probably wish that you let it go.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so interesting. You always hear people saying, doctors saying, that stress is linked to cancer and other, physical disease states. And I think what's missing in that is kind of the piece that where, the emotions are playing the role. So in other words, you have the circumstance that creates the stress, then you have the emotion that's generated because of that circumstance. And if that emotion isn't acknowledged at the least and processed, best case scenario, it just kind of stays in your body and festers.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that's just it in a nutshell. So it's
Yeah.
so crucial to give yourself the space for that. Even if it's just, I've had a stressful day, lay back on the floor, let your hips spread, let your arms kind of open and just take these really deep filling breaths and just give yourself 10 minutes to just be, because so much of this we just hold and hold. And like you said, stress we tend to think is outside of us, it's external of us, but we internalize it, and that's where it becomes dangerous for us. So that's the missing link, is what is your stress, identifying it, knowing how your body reacts to the stress, and then giving yourself an out, basically letting a release take place.
So if somebody doesn't have time, if they're feeling a really negative emotion or feeling very stressed and they don't have time to like go for a walk or sit in a sauna or, one of those sort of like more time intensive release techniques, can you talk about the breathing technique to kind of release some of that?
So they say something like 70% of our toxins that we hold in the body are actually relieved through the breath. And we don't typically breathe very well. We rush through things, we hold our breath, I talk fast and don't even exhale half the time when I'm going through a conversation with someone. So the breath is really bringing your attention back to that, can help you get rid of 70% of the toxins that you're holding. So then the body's not even having to stress about that. So there are different breathing techniques that you can try to sort of push that out. And I think in the beginning, sometimes people really like to do what I call a 4 square breath, which is where you inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then inhale for 4. Like it just sort of is this constant 4 count of every step, and holding and releasing and holding and inhaling. And that sort of lets you find the rhythm of your breath. And you can see, like when I first started this, sometimes I would panic I would think I'm not going to get an inhale fast enough. Like, am I going to be able to breathe? And then you find your rhythm with it. But one of my favorites is to double the exhale. So you would inhale for 4 and then exhale for 8. And that really is a challenge, but that extra, like at the 6, 7, 8 count mark, you're really pushing what's heavy been buried down in the lungs and all deep inside. And you're really pushing that out of the body. And that to me is probably one of the best ways to just expel some of that.
Yeah,
So
I use that all the time when I'm stressed. And it's so helpful.
And how long do you do it for when you sit down, like to do a breathing routine?
I maybe do it like 10 times. It doesn't take a long time. It takes maybe, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And
that's how long I set time for.
Yeah. And I just love it because it's something I can do instantly, no matter really almost in any scenario, whatever's going on, I can take those 2 minutes and do that breathing. And it really changes my internal state.
Yeah. It changes the chemistry of the body. And it also, because you're focusing on slowly bringing the inhale in, it also promotes clarity in the mind. All the brain fog can have a chance to go away for a minute. And you just bring in a lot of good oxygen, a lot of good clarity. You just feel better and feel lighter because the toxins have been expelled. So it's a great habit to build, an easy one too, that you don't have to go anywhere for. You don't have to have a helper. You can just do it on your own.
Yeah, and you had mentioned Yin Yoga. I know on YouTube there are a bunch of kind of Yin Yoga snippets. So if anybody's curious about checking those out, you can just go to, YouTube and type in Yin Yoga, and a few routines will come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the biggest thing I would say about Yin Yoga is that it's all about supporting the body. So lots of props usually are involved in Yin Yoga. So lots of pillows under body parts and blankets tucking you up so that your body isn't doing any work. It's being fully held and supported by what's around you so that you can it's sort of like floating, so your knees are propped up sometimes, your back is, supported, everything is supported. And that's not always the way we feel in life. So it's a great way to experience physical support in a time and world where you might not always feel supported.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very, for anyone who is not familiar with Yin, it's a very slow practice. So you might get into a position like child's pose, but you might stay there for several minutes. And it's interesting what comes up during those couple of minutes, because we're also attuned to like rush and get on to the next thing, and actually having to like be completely still in a yoga pose for several minutes. It kind of works a muscle in your brain that we don't often get to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I first started, I would kind of get agitated, irritated, like, hurry up, let's be done with this. And then now I'm like, no, stop, slow down. Let's enjoy this, So I do. I typically tell clients when you're starting, if it's uncomfortable, like if it's hard, just hold it for a minute and work your way up to 3. If it's a pose you're comfortable with, hold it for 5. I mean, we hold sometimes up to 6 and 7, 8 minutes sometimes just to allow full processing. And it really does allow, eventually you'll get out of your head and the mind just sort of stops and then the body gets to release. It's our minds that get in our way.
Mm-hmm.
Almost
Always.
all the time, right? It's hardly ever the body.
Yeah.
Over time the body can have its issues, but when giving the space, the body wants to heal, and it's our natural default state to heal. We have internal mechanisms that allow that to happen if we don't prevent it from happening. So it's a beautiful thing it's a gift to give yourself the time and space to do that. And it doesn't have to feel weird or selfish or any of that. It's just good health. It's good health.
Yeah, I love that. And like you mentioned earlier, so many of the people watching this are caregivers themselves and always giving to other people. But if you don't stop for a little bit each day and kind of start incorporating some of these things, you're actually not going to be able to continue to care for whoever you're caring for forever, because you're going to start breaking down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
and these are such small things. I mean, if you employed just 2 or 3 of them, you could do them under 5 minutes, and it's really rejuvenating. And it does sort of like stop the cycle of depletion, because I think we don't have an awareness for how depleted we actually are sometimes.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
depletion becomes our default state, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, Jackie, if people want to learn more about you, or check out your work, where should they go?
So I have a website, and my business is called Weaving Alchemy, and you can go to weavingalchemy.com, and you can reach out to me there.
Great. That's awesome. I'll, of course, link to all that below. But thank you so much for being on the show. It was great. All these tips are wonderful, especially this time of year. And, again, I just want to encourage the audience, if you're looking for a gift for yourself or someone else, the gift of Weaving Alchemy could be, just an amazing gift that you could share this time of year.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.